the challenge before us now, and I think Katie was thinking about this the entire campaign, is, well, if we win, we have to show people that we can govern effectively and that we can actually do the things that will improve people's lives.
Well, hello and welcome back to In the Meanwhile. I'm Marcus Harrison Green.
And I'm Nora Kenworthy. Still alive, still trying to hydrate, and somehow still podcasting.
Yes, you are, Nora, because you know what? We did it. We have officially put 2025 in the rear view mirror, and thank God we have.
Thank fucking God. Yes. I was thinking that, I think every year since 2020, I've been like, it couldn't get worse. Everything this year is going to somehow get better. And I don't think it has.
No, it has not.
But we can still celebrate this last year ending. The cursed scroll has been rolled up. The vibes are definitely being smudged. 2025 felt like 2 decades duct taped together and shaken like a vending machine full of nightmares, but I am very glad it is over.
You are in good company, I think, with probably 99% of our listeners.
Yes.
I gotta say, to me, this year was truly a year of extremes, right? It was either pure joy or the exact facial expression of someone watching a stranger hit their car that's parked, and then you pretend like nothing just happened. You just have this sort of mortified, petrified look on your face. There was just no middle ground for me this year. And that was a vacillation of extremes, shall we say.
Yes, that tracks. Yeah. Obviously, 2025 gave us the return of President Trump, a person we couldn't trust if his tongue was notarized. Actually, I don't even want to talk about Trump's tongue. Let's leave that there.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
A media environment where simply glancing at the news probably sent most of us into clinical depressive episodes. And an authoritarian government that was unlocking new villain levels, like it was speedrunning Call of Duty Democracy Collapse Edition.
That is all true, all painfully true. I mean, I guess the one good thing is, in terms of the economy, it was a lucrative time to be a therapist. So
there you go.
There's that. And also, and I know this is the smallest consolation imaginable, but this year could have been worse, Nora.
I mean, do you really want to say that? Right?
I mean,
I feel like that's inviting disaster, but it's a fair point.
Considering to your point about since 2020, I would say yes, it could, and I was one of those people that when, certain folks, I think it was Ta-Nehisi Coates, he was saying, this is not the worst thing that's ever happened to America, meaning, this year and Trump and so forth. And I was kind of like, but does that really matter? I mean, it's kind of shitty right now. But so I will amend my criticism of folks who were saying that and be like, hey, we got through it and here we are, that, maybe something magically will happen once with the clock striking midnight on December 31st. So
yes.
Anyhow,
still here, still laughing, still joking.
Yes, yes we are. Yes, we are. I will say though, alongside the chaos, we also saw something very interesting. It was not just protests, but we saw people across, I'll say it 3 times, the political spectrum slowly going, oh, so maybe the folks yelling fascism weren't being dramatic all this time. Maybe there was some truth to that. Maybe there was some reality. I think for some folks, their lived experience of the everyday actually sort of finally started to map with, oh yeah, these people weren't just being Cassandras. They were it was literally no, this was a legitimate. No, maybe they were being Cassandras because I guess Cassandra was actually right about the fall of the Greek Empire, correct?
Yes.
Our Trojan, whatever it was. Anyway, yes, we were correct. Is all I'm saying. We were freaking correct.
And we weren't overreacting when we were worried about Project 2025 and things. So,
Yeah, you mean the plans that were written in very clear detail about what they were going to do to
that they said they weren't going to
curb
do
democracy.
And then
Absolutely did. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wild
Yeah.
what happens when the mask comes off and we finally start writing policy.
I, I got, I still to this day am like, why were people wanting to give this administration the benefit of the doubt, knowing that they had already saw what they did
Yes.
previously in their first
Yeah.
administration? But whatever, whatever.
Believe people when they tell you who they are.
Particularly when they shout it loudly,
Yeah.
gotta say. Anyhow, though, I'll say this. And another thing that I'll say happened this year, despite the Supreme Court doing, and let me check my notes. Okay, an aggressive amount of harm.
Aggressive doesn't even touch it, Margaret.
That is, I'm trying to soften up the language here at the beginning of the year. The Supreme Court did block Trump from sending in the National Guard willy-nilly to cities for now. A very ominous for now, anyway, Nora, because you never know what may or may not happen with this Supreme Court going forward. But for the most part, there were not, I don't know, the imperial marches through cities as I thought there might, as it appeared, quite frankly,
Yes.
realistically appeared that there might be for a while.
I mean, nothing like a constitution with an asterisk and like 6 footnotes, Marcus.
Yeah. That is very true. That is very true. And I want to say, I think they blocked that on, the Supreme Court blocked that on a procedural
Ugh.
thing. It wasn't necessarily this is just straight unconstitutional. So anyhow, that being said, we also saw deeply red states, and I'm talking about deep red, like crimson red, bloody red states, like Indiana, say no to gerrymandering schemes that would have handed their own party, extra seats in the House of Representatives. And across the country, people started rediscovering something radical, Nora. Community, mutual aid, things that you talk about every single episode of this podcast. People have been showing up for each other. And I think, folks are remembering that the antidote to authoritarian nonsense is, for better or worse, other people.
Yes, totally agree. So 2025 was completely unhinged, but it reminded, I think, a lot of everyday people that solidarity still works. Fascism does not have friends.
Yes.
Community remains undefeated. The Trump administration has no taste. We have comedy on our side. And also everyone still hates JD Vance.
Yes, and apparently Nicki Minaj now as well.
Yeah, I know.
So
That was We're adding
we're-
to our hate list every week here, folks.
we're on Team Cardi on this
For
this
sure.
podcast, just so people know. And so I gotta say, Nora, and maybe this is just in my feels at the beginning of the year, but I will say that I think we were able to squeeze out just enough hope, just enough from last year to drag us into whatever 2026 has in store for us. But I'll say, before we sprint forward into fear, we want to take a beat and look back, because believe it or not, there are some more things from 2025 that we'd actually like to keep. So Nora, I'll start with you. What are you going to pack up, in a to-go box,
In my
if
little
you will?
duffel bag and carry
Yes.
drag across the threshold into the next year. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and this is something we've already said on this episode before, so you'll have to forgive me for saying it again, but I really feel like for a lot of people, the scales kind of fell from their eyes this year.
Mm,
There was a lot of growing awareness of just how bad things are, but also that, like, the jig is up, sort of. Like, people get how rigged the system is. They're pissed
Yes.
about it. They're starting to really connect the dots between economy and racialized capitalism and over policing and just all the shit that has been really doing so much harm in our communities. But I think it's probably the teacher in me. I always feel like the first step towards transformation is awareness and, like, true,
Yes.
honest reckoning with what we're up against. So in a weird way, that made me feel hopeful this year.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of piggyback on what you're saying, I think I've seen so many people, particularly I'll say, like, folks who are in my orbit, who are in sort of the center left to centrist spectrum, who have kind of, to your point, awakened in the fact that, oh, just because somebody has a D in front of their name, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have our best interests at heart, and that
Yeah.
they maybe have to be more than just, anti-Trump and say that, this president is horrible. I mean, I do believe that he is, but actually, like, are you going to put forward policies that actually materially impact our lives for the better, right? Are you going to put policies and vote for policies that make it easier just to live day to day, as opposed to just, the same old reheated neoliberalism where, everything, needs to be privatized, and, you're in the sort of pocket of big business and so forth. And I think we've seen that again, in New York, where you had uh, Mamdani, beat the, you know, pinnacle of the establishment in Andrew Cuomo. You also had that here, right, in Seattle, and we'll get into it later, obviously, in this episode with, Katie Wilson, beating an incumbent mayor who was definitely somebody who was very much, status quo, um, and and I'll just say it's, somebody who was very much in line, I think, with the power elite of our city. And so I think folks, to your point, are waking up to the fact that, oh, this government thing is actually supposed to work for us.
Yes.
That is how it is supposed to go. And so why don't we do our best to, attempt to not just remind the folks who are supposed to represent us, but like actually put people in there, whose goal and mission and pedigree is to specifically uh, benefit us and help
Yeah.
us move forward as as a citizenry and residents of our city. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
obviously today we're talking about elected officials. And of course, we've seen a lot of movement on elected officials. But, electeds can only go as far as the community is willing to push them, right?
Yes,
And so
yes.
I think it's also been really empowering to see communities really get wise and get mad about some of the prevailing systems that are no longer serving them. I feel like I have like friends who I knew were voting Republican in college who are now like posting about like fuck ICE on Instagram, and I'm like, well, that's really interesting, like that, like there's movement happening, or just like the number of people who are suddenly like very seriously considering what a universal healthcare system would look like for them in the United States, and really willing to like drag down the very
Yes.
broken system that we have that does not serve us, and start to contemplate something new. And so I hope that that translates into additional sort of movement, even if it's in the initial term destructive movement.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope so too, Nora, because I'll say, like, I think, hopefully the folks who, were in your orbit, in high school and college who voted Republican, who now are like, fuck ICE. I hope they are balancing out and being a countervailing force to the folks who I used to know in high school and college who voted Republican and now are like utterly
Yes.
devoted MAGA cultists,
Yeah.
where
Well,
it's
there's
like
also those
we
people, but
have no conversation anymore.
we
But
got to
yes.
open the door to the people who are coming our direction.
That is, you know what? That is true. That's true. We're leaving the light on,
Yeah.
as we say for folks. But as you say that, I mean, it reminds me of maybe this was our second or third episode. I have to go back and look, but our episode on civic bravery,
Yeah.
and we spoke to a elementary school principal who helps to lead the charge on organizing um, her community against ICE taking and attacking and targeting an immigrant family who were such such a part of the fabric of that community, and the students and family, I should say the family of the students, of two students who were at her school. And I think, again, is sort of one of the main purposes of this podcast is to continue to elevate and showcase stories of everyday people, right, who are just doing tiny acts of bravery, and those tiny acts of bravery eventually do add up, at least in my opinion, to create and spur major change. It's as if it's what Gabriel Teodoro said on an episode when we interviewed him. If more and more people, right, are speaking up about things that they should be speaking up about, right, then it makes it easier to do. And I'll say if like more and more people are acting and comporting themselves in a way that we should be comporting ourselves, meaning, fighting for folks who are being targeted and continue to be targeted, fighting for the underclass of our society, fighting for a more equal society, fighting against inequality, then it becomes easier for us to do. I think it's as bad as, right, just sort of direct evil, if
Hmm.
you will, is to, this this sort of social project that we're trying to have in our society. I think apathy is even worse. I think
Yeah.
apathy is the true enemy, right? When you
Yeah.
have so many people who are just willing to sit on their hands and constantly plug their ears and avert their eyes. But to your but to your original point, right? I mean, there are more and more people who are willing to take the fingers out of their ears, at least for a little while, and listen, and then also, not avert their eyes and actually see what is going on. And that has become encouraging, I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many different ways of speaking, right? And
Mm,
or communicating, right? Because some of this is online, some of it's like stickers on telephone poles, right? But I feel like I've seen so many expressions and people finding different ways to share their voice.
yes.
And also, I am really grateful that our really dark, deeply inappropriate American sense of humor has survived this year and continues to fill my cup. I mean, I think that fascism hates a good punchline, right? Like we've said that
Yes.
before on the
Yes.
show, and like it has been one of the things that has really not just like preserved my own sanity, but I think has also really taken fascism down a notch,
Mm,
made it
yes.
seem less um, unfightable, right? Because when these people become the flawed, deeply flawed, tasteless uh, humans who are not very good at doing pull-ups in our eyes, and like they're easier to stand up against, and I think that really matters.
Yeah, I'll say like our sense of, I think I'll say like a sense of humor is almost like the cockroach of democracy, in the sense of like you can take everything else away, like everything else might crumble, like nuclear fallout would
Yeah,
happen, and the cockroaches are still here, man. Like
yeah,
so you can't ever let the sense of humor go away. And I remember early on, in 2025, there were so many think pieces, at least that I was reading, about how, this is not a time for humor or,
right.
levity and so forth. And like, there's never not a time for it,
Yes,
right? I mean, it's, particularly in bleak times, right? You have to continue to find and curate light,
yeah,
right? You have to. It's a necessity, just in terms of, and I use this word in the most secular way possible, like to provide some level of sort of continued spiritual survival, if you will,
totally.
during this time period.
Totally. Yeah. And along with it, I mean, I just want to extend my gratitude to everyone who got like real weird this year. Like, I
Yes.
love the human weirdness that has like hit the streets this year, hit
Yeah.
social media. I
Yeah.
think,
Shout out to Portland with the,
yeah, I know
with
Portland brought the weird to everybody this year. Keep on being weird, Portland. No, but like, I don't know, in some weird way, that essential humanness of Americans standing up to fascism has really kept a light on for me this year as well.
Yeah, and there are so many, to your point about the various like memes and um I don't know, and just, you know, clips of people doing various things. Like it is like proof that as much slop is on the internet, it also is undefeated when it comes to like being able to, connect people
Yes.
around just around certain ideals and ideologies. So
Yes. Well, one thing we do get to carry into 2026, Marcus, is some genuinely good progressive momentum, as you were mentioning. There have been actual wins, which was kind of inconceivable when we started this year. State houses, cities across the country, and yes, right here in Seattle, where today, Katie
Yes.
Wilson is officially being sworn in as mayor. I think your mom is going to be talking at the
My
ceremony.
mom will be one of the speakers. Yes. So cannot wait to hear that.
It has been an honest to God grassroots campaign and movement against an incumbent with more money, more name recognition, certainly a lot more vitriol, and the full emotional and financial support of the status quo here in Seattle. And so we wanted to take a moment in this episode to really spend some time visiting with what that movement was and where we hope it'll take us next.
Yeah, and I would just say, just in terms of just on a like practical human level, I mean, it's just so good to see, like, fuck, sometimes the good guys can win. I mean, my God.
I know.
Which is why I encourage anybody who's listening, to this podcast today to go back and listen to our podcast interview that we did with Katie Wilson. I think,
Days
regardless,
after she was elected.
well, days after she won the primary.
Yeah. Yes.
And I will say that, like, regardless of whether you live in Seattle or don't, or, you think electoral politics, is worth, continuing to participate in or not, I think it is just worthwhile to listen to that conversation, because I think to something that we were saying earlier, it's seeing ultimately, the changes that we seek in this world and in this society, they're going to come from everyday people stepping up into positions that, that many people think are quote unquote not for them, meaning that, because they don't have a certain pedigree, or they don't have a certain history, or they don't have the backing of capital, there's no way that they can, possibly, um, enter into these sort of halls of power, if you will, when at the end of the day, we should be the ones occupying all of these halls of power, literally and figuratively.
Such a wild concept, Marcus. It's almost like we're rediscovering democracy or something.
I know. I mean, my gosh, it seems like, some folks are also rediscovering the fact that if you focus on people's actual material needs and don't immediately throw the most vulnerable under the bus, I'm looking at you, Gavin Newsom. Uh, People seem to respond to that. I mean, it's a wild thing. I know it's a tough sell for a lot of Democrats, though, but hey, maybe one day they'll crack the code. Hopefully sooner than later.
Well, they better, especially since like the lower 50% of the population now has like 1% of the wealth that the upper 10% does. I don't even know. Like,
shrinking.
I can't even comprehend the math ratios anymore on our wealth inequality. But I hope that the Democrats do a little bit of reflection on that.
I will say, like, I mean, they say we live in a K-shaped economy. I think it's just a straight, I don't know, what is it? Maybe just a parallel economy, yes, where it's like there's a top and there's a bottom. I don't know.
We live in fully different universes.
Absolutely.
But someone who really can help us understand how those politics are mobilized and how they're turned towards actual progressive wins is our guest today, Alex Gallo-Brown, who's a labor organizer, a published poet, and was the campaign manager for Katie Wilson's successful run for Seattle mayor. He's now been named the director of community relations for the mayor-elect's, actually I can say now today, mayor's administration. And it's wonderful to have him with us.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. Just want to dive right into it. From the outside looking in, Katie Wilson's win was framed as a surprise, a came out of nowhere moment from certainly from our national media. But so can you take us inside the campaign, and what did it actually look like from the ground when the rest of the country wasn't paying attention quite yet to this insurgent campaign?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there were sort of different stages of the campaign, right? Like the there was the primary, where I don't think people were paying attention as much. I think after we won the primary, there started to be more comparisons to Mamdani and kind of this national narrative that started to take hold. But when I started back in March, I had never worked on a political campaign before in this capacity. My background is in union organizing and poetry, so those two things, I guess, combined to lead to campaign management. I don't know, but I'd known Katie for a bunch of years, and I had left my job at a local union, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And Katie, Katie announced that she was going to run for mayor, which was very exciting. And I thought maybe I would volunteer on the campaign or knock doors. And as it turned out, the way things happened is I ended up becoming the campaign manager. And I think pretty quickly we started to realize just that there was a lot of enthusiasm for her. And I think what became very clear to me early on is that although Katie might not be a national name or known um, sort of super throughout the Seattle public to start with, among a pretty large base of people in Seattle, she really was a known entity and had an enormous amount of respect, right, for the work that she'd done over the past 14 years, leading this very scrappy organization to ultimately, win really big things for workers throughout the region, not just in Seattle, but in other cities. And that was really our volunteer base. That's where it began. And I think that volunteer base was really crucial because we were up against almost every institution in the city, every sort of, we were up against the establishment, but we had this secret sauce, which was all of these people who are willing to give their time and energy just to support us.
Yeah, for sure. This leads me to our next question about the campaign. We're constantly in this news cycle that's telling us that sort of big money is destiny in politics. And the campaign largely just refused to accept that premise. And really just was very people powered, very volunteer driven. How did that impact the way that you campaigned? And how did you keep that sort of people powered mobilization going and manage to kind of outperform what the money usually buys in a campaign like this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of different ways to answer that question. One, I mean, we saw in recent Seattle history where a whole bunch of big money came into an election and it didn't work. It kind of backfired, right? I forget what year that was.
That was the one where Amazon threw all the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 2017. But
Okay, there you go. We knew that Seattle voters are not necessarily going to be swayed by money. In fact, it can have the opposite effect. So I think that was in our minds. And then also, but the big part of the story that doesn't get told very much is the democracy voucher program. I think that, we used to joke. I think at the very end, Katie made a few phone calls trying to get people to give money, but it really for the entire campaign, we did not call anyone to ask them for money, which is unheard of from what I understand in campaigning. And instead, what we had was a field operation, initially led by Artie Nasrati, was really our democracy voucher guru, and he had this operation of volunteers who were out at farmers markets and other social spaces throughout the city collecting democracy vouchers, and we were able to raise almost $1 million that way. And so the fact that we were able to compete on that level with the incumbent mayor, because he had opted into this program, he also could only raise about that much money, allowed us to be competitive. And then, of course, he raised money that the independent expenditure that was supporting him raised a whole lot more money than the one that was supporting us. And that's where we were at the disadvantage. And we did start to see that have an impact towards the end of the campaign, where they just, they had the ability to, it seemed like, send a text message to every single person in the city if they wanted to, right? And it got very negative and kind of nasty. And I think it started to have an impact towards the very end there. But really, those democracy vouchers and that volunteer base we had, I think, allowed us to really hang in there, and ultimately prevail.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we've talked previously on this program about the power of the democracy vouchers program here in Seattle. You're sort of making us sound like this, weird progressive utopia with our democracy vouchers at our farmers markets. But can you say a little bit more about what the democracy vouchers enabled the campaign to actually focus on, rather than just picking up the phone and asking rich people for money?
Yeah. So, I mean, Katie, the way she likes to talk about it, which, is basically it changes the incentive structure. So, where in most elections, basically, there's certain individuals who, if you call them, they might be able to write you a big check. And so you're incentivized to build relationships with those people and to call those people. Now every single person in the city has $100 basically that they could give you. And so if you can go to a farmer's market and raise $10,000 with a handful of volunteers over a course of a day or two, maybe the numbers might be a little off there, but then that means that you don't have to call that one person who can write you a $10,000 check, and it really just democratizes that whole process. And I mean, we really felt it on this campaign. I think Katie and I think both had the same experience of like, seemed like a cool program, like supported it theoretically, didn't really fully understand it until we ran this campaign and saw how it really just changed the whole ball game.
Absolutely. One of the things when we had well, she wasn't then the mayor-elect, but when we had the mayor-elect of Seattle on, one of the things that I just really underscored about her was the fact that, she's just, quote unquote, just legitimately just a normal, everyday sort of regular person who really wanted to just, quite frankly, just, pursue this office to make sure that other people's lives could be better. And so I'm wondering though, she sort of ran with this authenticity, if you will. How did you all? I mean, and I'm asking this question for folks who may be contemplating a run, but have thought, oh, I don't have the what you traditionally would call the pedigree of being a candidate, and yet I think that I could do a great job. And so I'm asking for those listeners who may identify in that way. Well, how did you all go about I guess presenting her as authentic, but at the same time being like, this isn't just another brand. This is legitimately who this is, particularly these days where I've seen so many campaigns confuse you sort of branding and messaging for actual like on the ground organizing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I remember, talking very early on in the campaign, and one of the things that we heard sometimes, and it was often from women, was they would come sort of to me or Katie after a forum or something like that. And they would say like, "Look, like Katie needs to smile more," or like Katie needs to dress in a certain way, or something like that, right? And it was this kind of like, if you want to, this is the rules of the game. Like it sucks, but this is the rules of the game. You got to play this way. And I think, it's not, as campaign manager, that's not my role to tell Katie how she should be or what she should do or how she should act, right? That didn't feel like an appropriate role for me to play. But B, it's just like, that's just not who Katie was, right? It's like, she wasn't gonna change herself to run for office. She was gonna be herself, and if she was gonna win, she was gonna win on her own terms, and I think I don't know if me and her ever really had that conversation, but it was just understood from the very beginning. It's like, we're running a campaign that's very different than what anyone has seen before. Katie is not a typical candidate. She is, in her early days, they would call her an activist, maybe an advocate, ultimately, a community organizer, right? But this is someone who is really, and who's a policy wonk, and brilliant in many ways. And she was going to run being herself, and we were going to win or we were going to lose that way. So, yeah, I would encourage more people to do that. I don't know.
So just curious, you did not lean into your celebrity look-alike status as Ben Affleck to pull this victory off. Is that what you're saying?
It wasn't about me. This campaign had very little to do.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
But we do know who will play you in the movie version for sure. So, as you mentioned, especially at the end stages of the campaign, there were some pretty nasty moments in terms of attacks from incumbent Mayor Bruce Harrell and the PACs that were supporting him. How did you balance defending Katie Wilson against these attacks while also remaining focused on the far more important policy issues that were actually facing the city?
From the very beginning of the campaign, I think we understood that there was almost like a malaise in the city, I guess would be one way to put it. There was people were upset for a number of different reasons. Some of it had to do with the national politics. Some of it had to do with the feeling that, the city is out of control in terms of affordability and just not a place that is easy to live in anymore. there was a hopelessness, I think, that a lot of people were feeling. And I think that one thing I felt very strongly from the beginning was that we needed to provide like an affirmative vision for the city. We needed to inspire people. And we really tried to stay with that throughout the campaign. We didn't do a lot. I mean, there were times when Katie would, of course, criticize the incumbent mayor, criticize policy decisions or implementation, because there were lots of things to criticize. But we really didn't want it to become a mudslinging kind of match. In part because we didn't think that would serve us, but in part because I don't think that would serve. We didn't think that would serve the city. That we're all feeling it's a tough time, and so we wanted people to see our campaign as something that was hopeful. And I think when those attacks really started to come in earnest at the end, we struggled a little bit in how to respond, I think, at times, because and like, the one we did the video with her mom, that I think was a really effective way to respond to that particular attack about childcare.
That
And
was like my favorite part of the whole campaign, just so you're aware. That was the best.
yeah, I was really pleased with that. And it was fun because, and this was it's kind of the magic of the campaign, right? It was like Artie, one of our field directors, emailed over this idea for a script, and then I edited it a bit, and then we ran over to this attic where her mom was staying, and our lead organizer Matt filmed it on his phone, and her mom ad-libbed a bunch of stuff, and Katie ad-libbed stuff, and our volunteer editor put it together, and then we threw it up on. This was just kind of the nature of the campaign and how it worked, right?
I'll say, as somebody who was doing media criticism at that time against some of those ads, along with some of the publications that were sort of going with that story, I can tell you, I ate a lot of shit that the campaign did not have to for that for that. But I would do it again, and just for the record, I was never paid by the campaign. I just believed in what I was doing. So, anyhow.
Yeah. I mean, it was a nasty time, and I think I think there were I've heard some critique of like we should have hit back, or we should have responded differently. But I think we felt like that wasn't the direction we wanted to go, and it might have hurt us. I don't know, or if it could have backfired if we had gone a different direction. But in the end, we pulled it out.
Yeah, you definitely did. I mean, it took a couple days to ensure that with the long delayed counts that we have here in Seattle. But um, that being said, I mean, your background, is as a labor and essential worker organizer, and so I want to ask, what translated cleanly into campaign life and what didn't? I mean, because it just seems that you have to navigate between sort of movement timelines, which folks want things more immediately, and then also electoral timelines, which can not be as swift as people would like. So yeah, can you talk just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, so to be clear, like my role in the campaign, we had a field operation in the primary. It was just one person and volunteers, and that was Artie Nosrati. In the well, actually, and we had James George halftime, I believe, during the primary, and then in the general, we staffed up a bit. We brought in Sochi and CC Rouge, Sochi Makovich, and um, so like the day-to-day field organizing was really happening among that field team, and that's door knocking, that's volunteer recruitment, that's the farmers markets and the transit hubs, right? All of that stuff. My role, I would say, was you know um, the part that I think overlaps with my union organizing is really relationship building. It was almost more like community organizing. It was meeting, it was building relationships with people. It was meeting with them. It was bringing groups of people together for Katie to meet with, to understand their concerns, to understand what they wanted to see happen in city government. It was really to bring along all of these different people and all these different groups in a different kind of way. And than the normal canvassing and kind of engagement that campaigns do. And so I really enjoyed that work, and I think it had a lot of overlap with my work as a union organizer. And then I was doing a lot of the comms for the campaign, not the paid communications, because our consultants at Wind Power were doing that, but the kind of day-to-day social media stuff I was heavily involved with. And that's my writing background, I think, really came into handy there. So it was a cool experience for me, because I got to kind of use my organizing ability and also my writing ability And then half the time I was driving Katie around to events, and I was her chauffeur and her her scheduler, right? So I was wearing a lot of hats, but it was an incredible experience. Yeah.
Y'all say you're also obviously a published poet, author. I always have said that I think in the United States specifically, we lean too much into, somebody having had to been a lawyer or a business person, in terms of where we sort of garner our political leadership from. But you look at other countries, and yeah, God, it's a South American country, for maybe Argentina. I mean, not now, but in the past, where they had a poet who was their president and so forth. And I'm always, I'll say that I'm always um, uh, pleasantly satiated, you might say, with when the fact that we have, like in this particular case, you have somebody who, in yourself, who is an artist and creative, and was successful. It helped to propel a successful campaign.
Yeah, well, thanks. And Katie also is a writer, and a busker. We found out during the campaign. I didn't know that previously. Musician. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see more artists involved in helping to shape our political and economic and social systems. I mean, we all have to live inside of these systems, so why shouldn't we play a role in shaping them and influencing them? I do hope that we bring that spirit into this administration. I think we will. In fact, we're already talking about an affordability summit that we want to hold next year. Ideally, one that
Affordability is a new word, right? Or that's a recent word? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, we invented actually on the campaign. But we're hoping to bring artists into that space too, because on the other, I felt that way when I was in the labor movement too, where I really wanted to see more of a cultural aspect to unions and the labor movement. I feel the same way, in our political space, and especially for candidates on the left who are really trying to kind of reimagine what these systems are, right? So.
You have me grinning from ear to ear because I feel like the humanities department in me is celebrating. And it's also just such a lovely thing to do from a place like Seattle, where we have such a thriving history of arts culture and this sort of undercurrent of artists really shaping the broader culture of the city.
Mhm.
Speaking of culture and the way that Seattle gets represented, the national media tends to have a certain way of thinking about Seattle. Sometimes the words socialist or communist come to mind. Once the campaign really started getting this attention of national media outlets, what did you see them get wrong about this story? Or what did they refuse to ask that
Mm.
you wanted to really try and keep in the narrative? And how did you kind of keep what you felt was honest and true about the campaign in the narrative as it sort of moved to this more national stage?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't following the media as close as I probably should have because I was extremely busy. But I think
Fair.
I read a lot of the articles and things. I don't think there was anything that got so wrong. I think that there was obviously like a kind of like a salacious aspect to it, where people really want to see Katie as like and Zoran as this sort of like coming socialist wave or something like that. And I mean, as personally, I would love for that to be true. I don't know if that is coming on, but I hope it does. But I think the thing about Katie that I think maybe people maybe ultimately did understand, but it was hard that it's not as good of a story, is like she really is a pragmatist and she wants to govern. And I think part of the story here is the left took a real hit in Seattle over the last 5 years or so. And we saw this kind of these more, some would say moderate or even conservative candidates kind of sweep into office. And I think the challenge before us now, and I think Katie was thinking about this the entire campaign, is, well, if we win, we have to show people that we can govern effectively and that we can actually do the things that will improve people's lives. And some of those are maybe more socialist ideas, kind of based, but others of those are just like, how do we get homeless people inside and connected to services, right? Like, and that's not socialist necessarily. That's just what people want. It's just good governance, right? It's just a functioning society. So, and the other thing is, she's the mayor of a city and she has limited impact over the economic system of the world, right? So, or of the, so I think insofar as she can bring social programs into play that didn't exist before that will help people. That's what we want to do. But also, she just wants to govern well, and she wants the city to thrive, and that's what we're going to try to do.
Gosh, so Seattle will not have its own currency. Okay, just cross that one off the list, I suppose. I've learned, if I've learned anything in the last year, that's that. So that being said, and I want to ask this question for anybody who's listening who might want to think about running a grassroots campaign in 2026, whether that's at the their local city or county level or even state. I want to ask you, what is Wilson's win in your mind suggest about where progressive power is actually building right now? Whether it's in cities or workplaces or neighborhoods. And what would you tell somebody, again, who is considering a grassroots run in 2026 about, what do you think is the thing they should start doing right now that they won't find in, a typical campaign handbook, if you will?
Yeah, well, again, I mean, I think having that base of support, those volunteers that maybe aren't connected to an institution or an organization, but are willing to come out and give their time and energy, I think is crucial. Because, you know, I mean, I won't get into all the different things that volunteers did for us, but like all those videos, all those a lot of those photographs, a lot of the literal posting to social media and the monitoring of the comments and people driving Katie places at times or watching her child even, right, at times, like this was all done by volunteers. And I think without that support, it would have been extremely hard because we didn't have a lot of money, and we didn't have Katie is not this wealthy person who has all this kind of built-in support, right? A lot of people, I think, who run for political office, my sense is you kind of have to be pretty established to sort of be able to take this much time and do all of this, right? So I think having people in your corner who will support you in all these ways is really important. I think also just really understanding where the electorate is and what people care about, and running towards that. I think people are hungry for representation. I think that the political system has failed people in a lot of ways across both parties. And I think there's the perception that there's these kind of entrenched interests, and they're kind of trading favors, and it's kind of aloof from the rest of the society, right? And I think if you're able to find those issues that matter to people. I mean, one of the things I said, I don't do a lot of podcasts, but I did one other one. And one of the things I said in that podcast, which I'll repeat, is, there's this great book on organizing, Labor Notes, which, the professional organizers in the crowd or the rank and file workers who are organizing will know. And one of the lessons in that book is that you want to identify, this is in union organizing, but you want to identify an issue that's widely felt and deeply felt, because it's both, those things that a lot of people feel, but that a lot of people really care about strongly. And if you can identify those issues and you just can hammer on those, like you have the potential to really bring a large swath of the society, behind you. So, I guess those would be my two pieces of advice.
I love that. Do you also have any poetry book recommendations for the organizers in the room?
An old friend of mine named Gina Myers. I just bought her. She lives in Philadelphia. I just bought her book. I haven't read it yet, called Works and Days, I believe. But she writes kind of about at the intersection of sort of work and poetry and left politics and stuff. So yeah, Gina Myers. Check that book out.
Thank you. So as we've been talking about, I've been thinking about a sort of exchange that happened in my neighborhood on a Bruce Harrell sign during the campaign. I'm a PCO, I'm a precinct officer, so I pay attention to like the local clues, and I have a lot of conversations with neighbors about who they're voting for. And one of my older neighbors had a Bruce Harrell sign out in his front yard. And some person in the neighborhood had written in the sign on Sharpie, "But why though?" And then and then the person who owned the house actually wrote back on the sign and said, "Because I genuinely feel that things are better now than they were 4 years ago." And that sign like haunts me, because I don't think I talk to a lot of people in my life who think things are necessarily better than they were 4 years ago, but clearly that's a demographic in our city, right? And so I don't mean to put you on the spot about like whatever my weird neighbor thinks, but what what promises do you think the campaign can make, not just to people who are disheartened with where the city is, but maybe people who feel like things have been okay with that for them, or that Bruce Harrell did bring things to the city? And how do you think the mayorship can kind of also speak to and engage and bring in those people?
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So you're talking about the people who did feel like things had improved under Harrell. How will we kind of engage them and bring them along? Yeah, yeah, no, I think it's going to be crucial. I mean, we just won, by 2,000 votes, right? And which mean and a whole bunch of people didn't vote. So we need to bring a lot of people along who did not vote for Katie Wilson. And again, I mean, I think about where can we find, like, what do we all care about? What do we all want to see improve? Some of those things, I think homelessness is right at the top of that list, sort of public safety. I think there's a lot of concern throughout the city about that. And I know that that's one of Katie's very top priorities is getting people inside and connected to services and off of the streets. And I think everybody wants that, really. So I think that's one thing. I think that, one thing we've been hearing a lot about, recently is just how frustrated small business owners are. So that might not be a group that thought things had gotten better under Harold, but they might have also been skeptical of Katie for different reasons. And I think um, that is a group that we're very much interested in trying to support and help, because the city's not, if all of our mom and pop shops and small restaurants and stuff are closing, no one's happy. The city is going to be worse off for that, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Remembering
uh,
as well that
yeah.
2020, 2021 was also terrible for those
Mhm,
small business owners, right? So that could
mhm,
be a reason why they're saying things are
mhm.
slightly better, if
Sure,
not great, right?
sure, sure, absolutely. And then I think, yeah, I mean, I think those are the main things that I see, like, as people who maybe didn't support us, where we can find common cause, but that's just off the top of my head. I don't know. What are your ideas? What are you hearing out there?
I'll be sure to write about them every week, Alex, for you. Don't worry. No, I I I know we're close to the finish line, so I did want to just finish up with this question because I know we have a lot of listeners to our podcast who many of whom, quite frankly, have given up on electoral politics, right? I mean, we
Mhm,
had started this podcast in the aftermath of the recent 2024 presidential election where folks were just kind of had thrown up their hands. And so I know this is a city election and it wasn't a national election, and yet, right, we got a pragmatic progressive mayor that many people didn't didn't think this would be we know when I should say many people didn't think this would be possible. And so what do you have to say to folks who have sort of been disenchanted in recent years about electoral politics in terms of continuing to persist, knowing that yes, electoral politics is not the end all be all, but quite frankly, it is a vital um, tool, if you will, to a functioning democracy.
yeah, I mean, I was one of them. I was not really joking on the campaign, but I told people on the campaign I think Katie was the only person I would have done this for. Or maybe you, Marcus. I might have, if you ran for office, I'd probably be your campaign
Well, I might hold you to that one day. Wink, wink.
manager. But I also have been very disenchanted by the political system, and I think that people should continue to. Katie's not a normal politician, but she's going to be constrained in lots of ways by the normal political system that she's going to be working inside of. And so I think people, one thing that I hope that we will do differently, I know that we're going to try to do differently, because I'm going to be the director of community relations, and that's my understanding is previously this was a very small department of external affairs, it would be called, and they would work with other departments often. We're going to have a more robust community relations department within the mayor's office, and our goal really is to really engage community in different ways and bring people together into the decision making spaces as we think about which policies to put forward to really tackle the affordability agenda. That has to be done in partnership with community. I think people who are not connected to the spheres of power have to feel like they have some way to engage and influence and participate in these processes. And that's, our small but mighty team is going to be entirely devoted to that. So, yeah, I think we're going to try to do things differently. We're going to try to bring people in, and if we're not doing it effectively, we expect folks to hold us accountable. So,
Well, I know that as a member of the media, I can definitely guarantee you I will do that. That being said, Alex, obviously, I'm, even as a journalist, I'm certainly Team Seattle in terms of hoping the best for it. So, I will wish you good luck and just thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Well, again, Nora, like I will say, like I am all for run of the mill, quote unquote, everyday people stepping into office, and I think if nothing else, Alex has demonstrated to me, why that is important.
Yes. And oh my gosh, poets running campaigns. Let's have more of
Yeah.
that. I just love it so much. Giving hope to all of us who have a love of the humanities in our bodies somewhere.
Yes, we need more poetry and less
Yes.
vitriol coming from City
Yes.
Hall, and I think I'm fingers crossed that we have gotten that.
Yes.
Anyhow.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, Nora, this is our first 8 ounces of joy of 2026. I think I'll go ahead and
Are
start.
you telling me I have to keep doing this for a whole nother year, Marcus?
You do. You got to keep doing this exercise and vital practice of
Taking
finding
my
joy
vitamins of
every
joy.
single
Yeah,
week.
all right.
My
Okay.
goodness. My goodness. Nora, I will say, like, I think my 8 ounces of joy in trying to be somewhat forward looking is, realizing, that it's, and I'm trying my best to not sound like, I don't know, some, uh, I don't know, some, online YouTube life coach, but so I guess my 8 ounces of joy is perspective, right? In the sense of, I just think about where I started individually in 2025 in terms of emotionally, and then, where we were emotionally even when we started this podcast, and to where we are now, where it's like, no, our things obviously are not ideal. They're not in a place where we can even remotely call great, are good, are fair, are anything. I mean, we've had to do essentially nothing but cultivate resilience and
Yeah.
and resistance over this last year or so. But I will say, I don't know. I have this sort of, maybe it's delusional optimism that this year will be a year where there is an awakening that is somewhat sustainable, and where, we can put some of the worst of what has transpired in the rearview mirror, and at least I shouldn't say in the rearview mirror, but at least we can make sure not to repeat the worst going forward, at least for a little while. And
Yes.
so that is my 8 ounces of joy. There have been enough people and continue to be enough people who are not just waking up, but like refuse to fall back asleep.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Let that shit go, Marcus.
To quote Elsa from Frozen.
Exactly. Well,
Oh,
I think mine also has to do with perspective, actually. I was in Colorado visiting my family over the holiday. And because Colorado was like really bizarrely hot and unsnowy, which was kind of
oh
creepy.
goodness.
Yeah, it was really weird. But anyways,
I wonder what that could be a sign of. Anyway.
I know. God, it's almost like Earth is trying to tell us something. But because there was no snow, we actually got to hike up to pretty high altitudes. We got up to about 12, 13,000 feet
Oh, wow.
with children in tow. No one died.
Okay.
But we got up to one of my favorite spots in Colorado, which is this place where there's all these bristlecone trees. Do you know what bristlecone trees are?
I do not.
Okay, well,
I'm looking up right now, and I'm Googling
no, you
it.
should Google it because they're really beautiful. They're these like multi-thousand-year-old trees that grow at super high elevations, and they grow in this sort of like twisty, like sort of weathered, gnarled, if you will, way. And I love the way that these trees persist in like the most uninhabitable places, and not just like
Mm,
persist for like decades, but truly like, I mean, some of the trees that grow in California are like 4,000 years old, and
right,
they're just
right.
like these really cool specimens of what it means to persist. And so it was nice to spend some time with those very, very, very old trees. And also recognize that part of how they persist is by being like pretty like ugly and gnarled and, like weathered. They show their years, if you will.
Yeah.
But that's fine. That's fine for them.
No, so no baby Botox for those
Yeah,
trees.
exactly.
just, just live as you are. I mean, that is
Exactly. I'm
also
taking
a
that
good lesson,
into 2026. Yeah.
as we all should, as we
Yes.
all should. Well, with that being said, Nora, uh, shall we go ahead and read our sign off?
As good a time as any, Marcus. Well, folks, we survived an entire year with our faculties somewhat intact, which honestly, statistically speaking, feels like a win. Whether the good, the bad, or aggressively mid that 2026 possibly throws at us, we'll be right there with you. And if you'd like to keep us making this podcast into the future until we're inevitably exiled to Canada, which honestly could be worse, please donate to us at inthemeanwhilepodcast.com. You can think of it as a preventative cure for democracy. No pressure.
Absolutely. Well, huge thanks to today's guest, Alex Gallo-Brown. We're rooting for a Seattle that actually works for everyone and not just people who say, I totally get it, right before making rent unaffordable. As always, enormous gratitude to our producer, Jessica Partnow, who keeps this whole operation on the rails, and to Aham Oluo for music so good that roughly half the time it doesn't even matter what we're talking about.
You can catch In the Meanwhile on KVRU Wednesdays at 5 or listen to full episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, basically wherever you go to doom scroll with intention.
New episodes drop every Friday. And until then, folks, we'll see you in the meanwhile.